Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello and welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Merrill, and today we are sitting down to record episode number 2 with Jen Silver. Jen is the president of Roofing Utah, Inc., a complete roofing operation in Utah, and also a co-founder of Women-Owned Businesses of Northern Utah, who are fierce advocates for Utah women business owners. Welcome back, Jen. Excited to have another great conversation.
Me as well. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to speak about something a little bit different. We're going to talk about the impact that women are having in construction and how we can expand the number of women that are involved in plugging in and helping companies not only adopt to technological challenges and needs, but also how do we recruit younger women to get them into the trades and to help serve our industry like we know that they have the ability to do. So excited for the conversation today, Jen.
Well, great. I am too. So it's a very interesting conversation to have when you're talking about incorporating women into an industry that's been predominantly men. Or male dominated, whichever you'd like to use. There's a lot of gender barriers there. I can tell you from personal experience that some of the challenges I faced were around making sure that I had my product knowledge down, because the amount of times that I get quizzed about silly things that I know a man would not ask another man who is a roofing company owner, happens, and it happened often. And I just had to know that that was going to be kind of like a test that I had to pass in order to be accepted. Now, does it happen anymore? No. You know, I've pushed through that, and hopefully I've pushed through that for a lot of other women as well, that they can see that, yeah, just because a woman maybe doesn't go up and carry shingles up a ladder, or maybe she's not up swinging a hammer per se, doesn't mean that she can't get on a roof or, you know, doing an inspection and know what every single quality assurance point is, know what a proper installation looks like, and hold people accountable to that. You know, I can surround myself with experts in areas that I may not be an expert in, and have the confidence to know that the products that we're putting on are exactly the way that they should be in order for me to be able to warranty them the way that I do. I think a lot of women don't know where to start, right? Like, how do you bridge into an industry like that that's been predominantly male and not have to go into a typical woman role like a secretary or an office, administrator? Women are incredibly successful in construction sales, because women bring a different level of business to a male-dominated industry. Men tend, okay, I want to make sure not all men are the same, but men tend to be driven by competition and action, and women tend to be driven by contribution and relationship. And when you have all 4 of those in an industry, it's balanced. But when you don't, there can be some major challenges that happen. And so introducing women into key roles of management and training and sales and ownership can really drive a different result in your business, especially when it comes to taking care of your customers and long-term relationships that you may develop.
Yeah, you said a lot there that I think is not to be overlooked. We've had a lot of those conversations on this podcast. I know, we have Women in Construction month going on right now, and we have organizations. I know you're involved in Women in Roofing, and NAWIC is another organization we've had a lot of guests on, and important conversations. I think one of the things that's intriguing about what you're doing and a focus that you have is it's not just recruiting women into construction, but you're really focused on millennials and that younger group of young ladies that have an opportunity in this industry. Can you talk about that just a little bit, and maybe why you're looking there?
Ooh, we're going to say the naughty word millennials. Right?
I don't know
So,
how else to say it. So yeah.
no, I laugh because I think, so I am not a millennial. I'm a Gen Xer, and I think that baby boomers and Gen Xers are up in the night right now because they think, oh, I'm not going to hire millennials. I can't deal with them. I can't have them in my culture. Well, the bottom line is that's what's there. And it's not a chocolate or vanilla choose conversation. It is a vanilla conversation millennials choose. Like you don't have another option anymore. And I think really people are driven by, they have fear around hiring millennials because they don't understand what makes millennials tick and why millennials do the things that they do. And if you can have some basic understanding around just the way that their minds work, and probably even why I think their minds work the way they do, and understand the best way to what's the word I'm looking for? Integrate them into your culture successfully, millennials will bleed for you. They are fiercely loyal until they're not, right? And so it's a very interesting dynamic, and you have to know how to manage it.
Yeah. So you mentioned you're a Gen Xer, not a Gen Silver Xer, not to be confused with that. That's a different situation. But Generation Xer, and then Millennial. What does that mean to you? How do we break that down?
So I think Gen X is 69 maybe to 1981 or 82, as far as when you were born. I'm not exactly sure when it started, but I know it ends in 81 or 82. And then the millennials are the ones that are right after that. And then it goes into Generation Y and then Gen Z, right? So really, I think when we talk millennial, we're really speaking millennial and Gen Y. Gen Zs are still a little bit young. But those two generations are interesting from our perspective, right? We look at them and we think they're lazy. We think that they're on their phones all the time. We think that they have no work ethic. We think that it's weird that they're not driven by money. And we don't know how to incentivize them if money doesn't matter. Because for baby boomers and Gen Xers, we are driven by money. And it's easy to incentivize us through results monetarily. But millennials and Gen Y are not the same.
So what's your secret to making this work for you? What did you tap into, or what did you figure out in order to better communicate and recruit from that class of people?
So the first thing I think you have to realize is the way that millennials grew up is they grew up in pods, right? So when they would go to class, they would sit in groups, and pretty much everything that they did and worked through had a group type of atmosphere. They had social media where they had connections. They had their groups where they had connections. And when you take a millennial and you put them into an office by themselves, they don't do very well. And unfortunately, millennial parents, which are the boomers, they worked really, really hard, right? Because their parents suffered in the Great Depression, and they never wanted to be in that situation. And so they worked really hard. They did really well for themselves, but they didn't always have a work-life balance. And so when they would come home, they were so exhausted from working, they didn't really explain work ethic or what it takes to be successful in order to drive their millennial children to understand those things. Instead, they said things like, make sure you always have a work-life balance. Don't underestimate your family. Make sure your family stays a priority. Make sure that you're doing something that matters to you, right? As they reflected back, because they worked so hard. And so what that did to the millennial culture is they need to be driven by feeling good. Okay. And you can drive that in a culture by contribution, giving back to your community, having teams where, they can support each other through different things and reach goals together as a team, but not isolating them. And the financial drive has to be around something that makes them happy. You'd be better off running a competition where they get to donate to a charity than you would be a competition where they're going to get $500.
Interesting. I've never heard that before, but it makes a lot of sense to me when I think about it. And our staff, that younger group,
they love it. They love feeling like they're a part of something bigger than them. And like I said, they are fiercely loyal when they feel that way, and they have the leadership and they have the direction, but they don't have a lot of knowledge around work ethic. They don't think okay, if I don't have something to do and somebody hasn't told me, it doesn't necessarily occur to a millennial to go find something else to do. Right? That it's a very interesting disconnect. You have to have clear expectations, and if you're done with this, here's another thing that you can do. The expectation is that then you would follow up with customers, or the expectation is that then you would, go and do this part of your job again, or whatever it is. But you can't expect that inherently they just know, because they don't. Once you teach them, they will do it, but you have to teach them.
Yeah, we have a analogy we use here often in some of our executive discussions or sales meetings, and we talk about like a UPS driver. And if you just fill the truck up with packages and the job is to deliver all the packages, like most all the drivers will do that. They won't go home till all the packages are gone. But if as a company we're not loading that truck up, then they'll do the work that's there and available to be done. And so I think some of that is onus on us as an organization, as an executive team, to make sure that the trucks are full, right? And that the expectation is that when you bring it back, it needs to be empty, right?
Yes. Clear. It's exactly right. Clear expectations and ways to get there. I hear a lot of business owners complain about millennials being on their phone. And I have always asked them, well, where are they? Well, they're in their office. Well, are they alone? Yeah. So them being on their phone is actually their desire to feel a connection. Like if you put millennials and you team up, you put them in a room together, they will work silently next to each other and keep working, and never get on their phone. It's crazy. But if you keep them isolated and by themselves, I find that they'll stop and they'll get on their phone for a little bit, because that personal connection that they're used to having from being in pods and doing group work is gone. And so it's almost like they don't like to be alone. And I've tested the theory many times, and every time I'm right. I just put them in the office together, tell them to go work on it together. I'll walk by and they're quiet. They're not talking. They're not distracted, but they're getting stuff done, but they're not on their phones.
Now I've got to try a sampling of that. I'm sure I'll probably find out that you're right.
Yeah. Or, if you have it so that you have multiple desks in an office, that is effective. What are those? I drew a blank on when you have those cubicles. Thank you. That is exactly the word I was looking for. I'm like, why can I not think of that word? Cubicles tend to be really effective too, because they're still in the same area and they still feel that connection, but there's a little bit of space between them. But if you look at a lot of the new millennial techie companies, right? They don't have offices. They have these huge open floors with desks all over. And that's because that's what their culture and the millennial generation understands and wants.
Yeah, I'll sit here today, I'll sit there tomorrow, depending on what's going on. Let me float and move as needed and as I feel. Does that sound right?
Yep, sounds exactly right.
Interesting. So how do you recruit millennials? You put ads out on Facebook?
You recruit millennials through other millennials.
Oh, okay.
That is the
They're not on
absolute-
Facebook, are they?
No, they're on Instagram, which I do not understand Instagram. But you can, I think that there are ways to do it on social media, but the best place or the best way to recruit millennials is through other millennials. So it's talking to people, it's talking to, I get my nails done. So talking to my nail lady and talking to other customers in there. And it's all word of mouth because millennials will work for people that they trust or people that they believe in. And they'd rather be unemployed if they don't find that.
Yeah, which that concept is just completely foreign to me. Rather be unemployed. I mean, it's not even an option, right? But yet we see every day that there are plenty of people that would rather be unemployed, like you said, than gainfully employed in something that they don't feel connected to.
And if you are running ads on Indeed, or something like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, whatever, your ad has to be catchy. You need to talk about your core values and your organization and who you are as a company and what you're about first. That's what's going to catch them. Then you can talk about what you're looking for. But you have to sell that your company is going to bring contribution and value to their life before they'll even look at what the job is.
So when you say contribution and value, what comes to mind for you? What do you think millennials would find that would fit that category?
Millennials love to give back. So ways that your business gives back to the community. And I think personally, I think all small businesses should give back to the community that supports them. I think it generates the right thing for the economy on both sides. Maybe the fact that you guys, if you're an organization that has every Friday is team building lunches and basketball, or, you give mental health days once a month, or whatever it is that works inside your company that goes towards that work-life balance and making sure that they feel good about what they're doing, that they're making a difference in the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I think there's some interesting points in there. And so for a construction company that's busy, you're behind schedule, you've got, how do you make those adjustments to allow for things like that?
So we ran a lot of promotions. Like last year for the month of April, we ran an autism promotion and we gave back 5% of our sales to autism. We put a roof on for a veteran on Veterans Day this year. We gave back to women-owned businesses in March. We gave back to teachers in May. So, talking about those things, or, Habitat for Humanity, if you're in construction, working at a soup kitchen, doing a coat drive. There's so many small things that you can do to drive that feel good need, I guess is probably the best way to say it for millennials and Gen Y. It just depends on what your business model is and how you fit that into your culture. And it has to be organic. You can't force it, because if it's forced, everybody is going to be able to feel that. So you have to sit down with your team and figure out what people are passionate about. Is it giving back to St. Jude's? Is it doing something for teachers? Is it doing, building a house in the community, or giving a roof away to somebody that they know can't afford it but needs it? Or, there's lots of different options, but it has to fit with your company.
Yeah. So you're saying a mission driven, purpose driven, something that makes them feel like they're really contributing to their community and society.
And the crazy thing is, you Gen Xers and baby boomers will like the way it makes you feel too.
Yeah. Yeah, no question about that. We had a guest on recently, Zachary Mannheimer, who his company printed the very first 3D printed home, and they donated it through Habitat for
I love
Humanity.
that.
So, yeah,
I love that.
really cool story. So, so what kind of other structure or approaches can companies take to not only attract millennials and get them hired, but keep them happy and yet still continue to drive production and revenue, which is the purpose of a business?
I think a mentor program is really important when you're bringing millennials in, because as an owner or as a manager, they can be exhausting based on their needs, especially coming into the organization initially. But I think if you set them up with somebody that can mentor them and guide them and help them and support them, that takes that pressure off of a manager, I think that that's a much easier way to do things. Obviously, the first round is going to fall on the manager or the owner, depending on the structure of the business. But I think a mentor program can help generate the relationships that are needed, create the foundation, and take some pressure off of senior leadership.
Yeah, great advice. So let's say we have a program in place. We have employees that are mentoring millennials and newer hires from this younger generation. They're cranking along. What are some challenges that come up that really turn off these millennials, where they say, you mentioned they're fiercely loyal until they're not? So what kinds of things are a deal breaker for that group of our employment workforce?
Absent leadership. Okay. So, and that's what happened to me. And I learned that the hard way. I got asked to go on a tour last September and we were really slow. And I talked to my team about it and we all agreed that it would be a great idea. It would generate some brand recognition for the company. But what we underestimated is how much brand recognition and how much organic growth. So if you understand organic impressions in web traffic, in the month of August, we had 78 organic impressions. In the first week of September, we had 661. So when that happens, your Google ranking goes up, and every time somebody's searching, you're going to appear quicker and higher up in the list, right? So the business got slammed, and they were not prepared to deal with that much business. And I was not here as a leader. I was elsewhere, and I was trying to insert accountability and, reporting so that I could support them from the road. And that just added more overwhelm. And I came back and they had all quit. And that was 30 days. And in February, they offered to work for free while we were trying to figure out how to navigate through a $150,000 loss the year before. So that's what I'm saying. They are fiercely loyal until they're not. And I think the number one thing is absent leadership. You can't not have those things in place for them. You can't not be there and expect them to navigate through new situations when they just don't have the skill set and the patience. And the second they get too stressed out and you're not there to help guide them on how to, pull themselves out of that, they're done.
Yeah, a lot of insights there. What do you have any other pointers or tips that people can look for when they're hiring and interviewing millennials? Are there things that that we should be looking for or vetting through?
Don't think they know or expect them to know nothing in a lot of ways. Okay. If you expect nothing, everything they do know is just a blessing and it's not a disappointment. I mean, I took my team on a business trip in April of last year, and I had an entire packing list for them of what they would need to take to a business conference, what business casual meant, what professional attire meant, what behavior was appropriate. Just for example, just because maybe there's an open bar doesn't mean that you go and you get completely sloshed at a business function, right? Like if you're going to choose to drink, then you choose to drink 1 or 2 drinks. You know, all like things that you would think people would comprehend from a business side, but they didn't. I mean, I had one kid that had never bought a suit jacket before. So I actually physically took him to the store and showed him how to buy a suit jacket and, you know, how they have to measure him and all of those things. And so, yeah, is that outside of my job as a business owner? Yes. Yes, it is. I 100% agree with that. But the kid's parents didn't live here. He had no other support network. And it's one of those, did I want him to be successful and did I want him to stay? Or was it not worth my time? So the more you expect that they don't know anything and are willing to teach them those things, the happier you're going to be as a boss and the more successful that they're going to be as employees or team members.
So when you're interviewing millennials for a job opening, are there certain questions or is there a different protocol that you use in that interview process?
I like to hire based on traits and who people are and not necessarily what they've done in the past, because I think that I can teach knowledge. So I need to understand that they have the ability to retain knowledge, but I prefer to hire based on cultural fit and personality and desire and eagerness and willingness more so than experience and knowledge. But I think that's up to an individual business, right?
Yeah. So with the personality, are you having them take personality tests, or is it more of a feel or a vibe that you get from them? And what is it you're looking for more specifically?
So I do a work trait assessment called an MPO. It does not have any deciding factor on whether or not I would hire somebody based on that, because I believe that most work traits work in every position. But it does give me an idea of how they learn, how they work, what environments they're going to be successful in as far as a working environment goes. And I think it's good for the team to understand how different people work. For example, a process oriented person, they go step by step by step, and when you interrupt a process oriented person, they have to start all over to get to where they're at. So I teach my non process oriented people, my multitaskers, so to speak, right, that jump from all over to leave the process oriented people alone until they're done. Just say, hey, I need to speak with you when you have a minute, but don't assume that you can talk to them right then, because you probably are going to set them back 30 minutes just by having a 2-minute conversation. Whereas me, somebody can walk in and they can interrupt me and stop me, and I can answer the question and pick right back up and keep going. Right. And so if people understand that about each other, they can respect each other's time and be a lot more productive. And that's really what I use those for more than I do hiring. A lot of it is just in the interview, the answers that they give or how I feel, and I usually let them do peer interviews too, because people are more transparent to somebody that's not the boss. Right. And I get feedback from my team on whether or not they think that they would be a good fit with the team. I think that can be a valuable asset for hiring and training or recruiting. Sorry.
And then do you have a trial period or a ramp up period or a process that you go through to make sure, number one, it's a fit for you, but it's also a fit for them before you get too invested?
Yeah, I think that there's, we have a 90-day period during training where we sit down and do, periodic evaluations I think it's 30 days we do them, where it's kind of a check-in, although I check in a lot and I observe a lot, body language, interactions and other things. And I usually know within the first week if they're going to work out or not.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Well, it's been another fantastic conversation. I've definitely enjoyed this. I guess before we wrap up this part of the conversation, what is the one takeaway that you hope the listeners would have from this episode?
The one takeaway I would hope that they would get is to not be afraid of hiring millennials, and to understand that the less you expect and the more you're prepared to just train and teach, the happier you'll be.
Love it. Well, that's great advice. And as always, definitely appreciate the conversation and what we've learned. To wrap up, if there was one piece of advice that you could give your 20-year-old self, what would that be?
One piece of advice. I think it would be, don't modify or change my goals or life to fit into someone else's. Find people that naturally fit into yours.
Well said. Well, I can't add anything to that. Thank you again so much for joining us today. We're looking forward to listening to this and sharing it with our audience and connecting again down the road.
Thank you again for the opportunity to contribute. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. Be well.
You too.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. If you liked the conversation we had today, or were able to learn anything new or helpful, please make sure to follow us on our WorkMax page on LinkedIn and on Instagram at WorkMax_. And subscribe to the show on iTunes or your preferred podcast platform so you will never miss another insightful episode. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review and share the show with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us and will allow us to continue providing impactful information with others looking to improve their results in their business and, in turn, their life.